What happens when entitlement meets genius at 35,000 feet on the maiden voyage of a revolutionary new aircraft? One passenger's comfort is her only concern. She targets a quiet black woman, demanding her seat, her space, and her deference. She sneers about affirmative action and questions how someone like her could afford such a ticket. But she has no idea who she's talking to. She isn't just speaking to a passenger. She's confronting the visionary architect who designed every single inch of the cabin around them. The clash is inevitable. The irony is delicious, and the karma is about to be absolutely brutal. Dr. Lena Morgan settled into seat 14B, a sense of profound, quiet satisfaction washing over her. This wasn't just any flight from New York to London. This was the inaugural passenger voyage of the Odyssey Airlines Ethelred A390 Neo, an aircraft that represented 4 years of her life, a culmination of her sweat, her intellect, and her soul. From her seat in premium economy, she had a perfect vantage point. She could see the gentle, intelligent curve of the overhead bins she'd fought for, designed to create a feeling of spaciousness. She could feel the precise lumbar support in the seat, a feature born from dozens of ergonomic prototypes. She could even see a faint, iridescent shimmer in the bulkhead paneling her signature lumen weave material, designed to absorb harsh light and create a calming ambience. She wasn't here as a VIP. She had insisted on flying as a regular passenger unannounced. The board of directors had offered her a suite in first class, but Lena had politely declined. You couldn't understand the flow of a forest by sitting in the ranger's tower. You had to walk among the trees. She needed to experience the A390, not as its creator, but as its user. She needed to hear the unvarnished comments, see how people interacted with the space, and feel the rhythm of the cabin during a long-haul flight. She wore simple black trousers, a comfortable cashmere sweater, and her hair was tied back in an elegant but unassuming bun. To anyone who glanced her way, she was just another traveler. That was precisely how the woman who stopped abruptly in the aisle saw her. The woman was in her late 50s, dressed in a beige Burberry trench coat that was probably worth more than Lena's entire outfit. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed, her face a mask of strained patience. She clutched a boarding pass in one hand and pointed at Lena's seat with the other. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp and carrying an unmistakable note of accusation. "I believe you're in my seat." Lena smiled politely, ready for a simple misunderstanding. "Oh, I don't think so. I have 14B. She held up her own boarding pass. The woman whose pass clearly read 15B 1 row behind barely glanced at it. Her eyes narrowed, scanning Lena from head to toe. It was a look Lena was intimately familiar with, a quick, dismissive appraisal that calculated her worth, her background, and her right to occupy a space all in a fraction of a second. There must be a mistake, the woman insisted, her voice growing louder. "My husband Richard is in 15A by the window. I booked 14B specifically. It has slightly more legged room because of the curtain placement for the galley. I always book this seat," she said, I with the force of a royal decree. A flight attendant, a young man with a kind face and a name tag that read Marcus, approached gently. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" "Yes," the woman snapped, turning on him. "This woman is in my seat. I need you to move her." Marcus looked at Lena's boarding pass, then at the woman's. "I see, ma'am. You're in 15B right behind this seat. It's a simple mistake." "It's not my mistake," the woman retorted, her cheeks flushing. "The system must have glitched. I am a Platinum Medallion member. I have flown over 2 million miles with this airline. I know this cabin configuration. I am supposed to be in 14B. Lena remained seated, her calm, a stark contrast to the woman's rising agitation. I'm afraid 14B is my assigned seat, she said, her voice even. I'm happy to wait while you sort it out with the staff, though. The woman who Lena would soon learn was named Carol Baxter. Scoffed. She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper that was still loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. Look, I don't know how you managed to get this seat. Maybe you used some kind of voucher or a diversity quota upgrade, but some of us pay full fare for specific privileges. I need this seat. The words hung in the air, thick and ugly. Diversity quota upgrade. The phrase struck Lena not with the force of an insult, but with the dull thud of profound ignorance. Here she was, the lead architect of the entire multi-million-dollar interior, the woman who had personally signed off on the very seat Carol was claiming being accused of getting it through a handout. The irony was so immense, it was almost comical. Marcus, the flight attendant, looked horrified. Ma'am, that is completely inappropriate. The seat assignments are correct. Please let me help you to your seat at 15B. Don't you ma'am me in that tone, Carol hissed. I want to speak to your purser. This is unacceptable. I have a knee condition. The extra inch of space in this row is a medical necessity. A man in seat 14A, who had been watching the exchange over his newspaper, finally spoke up. For goodness sake, the woman has the ticket for the seat. Just go to your own. Carol shot him a look that could curdle milk before turning her attention back to Lena. Her eyes filled with a strange mix of fury and disbelief. It was the look of someone whose entire worldview was being shaken. In her mind, the universe had a certain order, and that order involved people like her getting what they wanted, especially over people who looked like Lena. Lena felt a slow burning fire ignite in her chest. For 4 years, she had poured her genius into this aircraft. She had fought tooth and nail against budget cuts, against skeptical engineers who said her ideas were too ambitious, against the quiet, pervasive sexism and racism of the aerospace industry. She had won. The proof was all around them, in the silent, efficient air circulation system, the soft, close overhead bins, the custom-blended LED lighting that would help mitigate jet lag. And now, on its maiden voyage, her magnum opus was being christened by this petty, prejudiced tirade. She took a slow, deep breath, not of anger, but of resolve. She had wanted to observe this flight as a passenger. Now she had a very specific subject to study, the human response to baseless arrogance. I will not be moving, Lena said, her voice soft but unyielding like steel wrapped in velvet. This is my seat. Please find yours so the rest of the passengers can board. The line of people waiting in the aisle was growing, their faces a mixture of annoyance and morbid curiosity. Carol Baxter stood her ground, a monument to misplaced entitlement, refusing to budge. The battle for seat 14B had just begun, and it was quickly becoming about much more than just a place to sit. The standoff in the aisle of the Ethelred A319neo had created a bottleneck. Passengers craned their necks, their carry-on bags bumping against one another as they tried to get a glimpse of the hold-up. Marcus, the flight attendant, was trying his best to de-escalate his professional smile, stretched taut over his growing frustration. Ma'am, Mrs. Baxter, he said, his voice a strained whisper. You are holding up the entire boarding process. We can discuss this further once we are airborne, but for now you must take your seat. Carol's husband, Richard, a portly man, with a face perpetually set to mildly inconvenienced, finally emerged from his window seat in row 15. "Carol, what's going on? Just take the seat." "Richard, you don't understand," she said, not taking her eyes off Lena. "This is a matter of principle. The airline has made an error, and this person is refusing to be reasonable." Lena met her gaze directly. "The only one being unreasonable here is you," she stated calmly. "You are making a scene over a seat that is not yours." Carol's face contorted in a sneer. "Oh, I'm making a scene. I'm the victim here." "I am a loyal customer being treated abysmally. You probably wouldn't understand the value of customer loyalty." She gestured around the cabin with a dismissive wave of her hand. "This is a brand new plane. Everything is probably run by computers and new age policies that favor certain demographics over paying customers." The dog whistle was now a foghorn. Several passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. A young man a few rows back, wearing headphones, subtly angled his phone, its screen dark, but its camera lens pointed directly at the confrontation. Lena noticed him, but didn't react. Marcus stepped between the two women, a human shield of customer service. "Mrs. Baxter, if you do not take your seat, I will have to call the gate agent and the purser. We cannot delay departure." "Good call them," Carol declared, crossing her arms. "I want everyone to see how Odyssey Airlines treats its platinum members." As if on cue, the senior flight attendant, a poised woman named Sarah, arrived. She assessed the situation with a quick, experienced eye. Marcus quietly explained the issue, his words laced with apologies for the disturbance. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but Lena could see the flicker of exasperation in her eyes. "Mrs. Baxter." Sarah began, her tone impeccably professional. "I am the purser on this flight. I can see you are assigned to 15B, and this passenger," she gestured to Lena, "is in 14B. The assignment is correct in our system. I must ask you to take your seat now." "And I am telling you your system is wrong." Carol's voice rose to a near shriek. "I booked this seat 6 months ago. Check my records. We can certainly file a complaint for you." Sarah offered her patience, clearly wearing thin. "We can look into the booking records, but right now on this flight seat, 14B is assigned to Dr. Morgan." The use of the title, Doctor, seemed to momentarily throw Carol off her rhythm. She blinked her gaze, flicking back to Lena with a new, if still skeptical, assessment. She was likely imagining a doctorate in some soft science, something she could easily dismiss. Dr. Carol repeated with a condescending chuckle. "A doctor of what grievance studies?" The insult was so childish, so absurdly off the mark, that Lena almost laughed. Instead, a profound weariness settled over her. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. This was a performance of prejudice, a public display of a belief system that saw a black woman's success as inherently fraudulent. Every promotion Lena had ever earned, every award she had ever won, had been accompanied by the whispers of skeptics who attributed her achievements to anything but her own merit. To hear that same sentiment echoed so crudely by this stranger inside the very masterpiece she had created was a uniquely painful experience. "My field of study is irrelevant to this situation," Lena said, her voice losing its softness and gaining an edge of pure, cold authority. "What is relevant is that this is my seat. The purser has confirmed it. The flight attendant has confirmed it. The only person who seems to be confused is you. Now, for the last time, please move out of the aisle." The directness of the command, delivered with such unwavering confidence, finally seemed to penetrate Carol's wall of entitlement. Her husband, Richard, sensing they were losing the sympathy of every single person on the plane, tugged on her arm. "Carol, that's enough. Sit down. You're embarrassing yourself." "I am not," she protested, but her voice had lost its conviction. She finally shot one last hateful glare at Lena and retreated, squeezing past the purser to flop into her assigned seat. 15B. The boarding process resumed, a wave of relief palpable throughout the cabin, as Carol forcefully shoved her carry-on under the seat in front of her. She muttered to her husband, loud enough for Lena to hear clearly, "Unbelievable. This is what the world is coming to. No respect for established patrons. They just give the best of everything to these affirmative action hires to look good." Lena closed her eyes for a moment. The low hum of the engines was a familiar lullaby, a sound she had come to associate with progress and innovation. For the first time, it was tainted by the ugliness of human ignorance. She felt the gentle vibration as the jet bridge retracted, and the doors were armed. They were now sealed in this metal tube for the next 7 hours, a self-contained society at 35,000 feet. Lena was its architect, and Carol was its most disgruntled citizen. The flight had just begun, but Lena had a sinking feeling the turbulence was far from over. An hour into the flight, the tension had simmered but not dissipated. The cabin lights were dimmed to a soft blue, a specific hue Lena had chosen to promote relaxation during the initial climb. The meal service had begun, and the clinking of cutlery provided a temporary distraction. Carol Baxter, in the seat directly behind Lena, had made her displeasure known through a series of petty, passive-aggressive acts. She sighed loudly every few minutes. She kicked the back of Lena's seat, feigning it was an accident. She complained vociferously to her husband that her meal was cold and that her seat, the one she was forced to take, was defective. Lena did her best to ignore it, focusing instead on her notebook, where she was jotting down observations. The flow of the service carts in the aisle was slightly impeded near the galley, a note for the next design iteration. The latch on the tray table in 14A seemed a bit stiff. These were the details she had come for, the small imperfections that could only be found through lived experience. But her concentration was repeatedly broken by the stream of complaints flowing from row 15. Finally, Carol unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, flagging down Marcus with an imperious wave. "This is unacceptable," she announced to the beleaguered flight attendant. "My in-flight entertainment screen is frozen. It's been frozen for 20 minutes. On a brand new aircraft. What kind of shoddy operation is this?" "I'm very sorry, ma'am. I can try to reset it for you from the main panel," Marcus offered. His voice strained. "You've been trying to do things this whole flight. I want to speak to someone in charge. Not the purser, someone from corporate. I know for a fact there are executives on this inaugural flight. Get me one of them. Now." Marcus looked panicked. This was a highly unusual and aggressive demand. But before he could respond, a calm, authoritative voice came from the front of the premium economy cabin. "Is there a problem here, Marcus?" A man in a sharply tailored suit was walking toward them. He was in his early 60s, with silvering hair and an air of effortless command. Lena recognized him immediately. David Harrison, the Executive Vice President of Customer Experience for Odyssey Airlines. He was one of the few people who had championed her more radical design concepts from the very beginning. Mr. Harrison Marcus said, his relief palpable. "My apologies for the disturbance. This passenger is experiencing some issues." Carol's demeanor changed instantly. Her face brightened, her posture straightened. Here was someone she deemed worthy of her complaint. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming. I'm Carol Baxter. My husband and I are million-mile flyers, platinum members for over a decade. And I must say, this has been the single worst flight experience of my life." Mr. Harrison listened with a practiced, patient expression as Carol launched into a breathless tirade, recounting the entire saga of the seat dispute, painting herself as the aggrieved party, and Lena as an uncooperative usurper. She finished by gesturing dramatically at her frozen entertainment screen. "And now this. It's emblematic of the entire experience. All style, no substance. Clearly your company has prioritized flashy new aesthetics over functional reliability and customer service." Mr. Harrison nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. He glanced at the frozen screen. Then his gaze drifted past Carol, landing on Lena. His eyes widened in recognition, and a warm, genuine smile broke across his face. "Dr. Morgan," he said, his voice filled with surprise and delight, completely ignoring Carol. "I had no idea you were on this flight. I thought your team was flying out next week. It's an honor to have you with us on the maiden voyage." He stepped past the stunned Mrs. Baxter and extended a hand to Lena, who took it with a polite smile. "Hello, David. I wanted to see her in action without any fuss. You know me." "Of course," he chuckled. "Always the hands-on approach. And what do you think I mean apart from this disturbance?" He shot a quick, pointed look over his shoulder at Carol. "Is she living up to your expectations?" "She's a marvel." "David," Lena said, her voice filled with a quiet pride that was impossible to miss. "A few minor things to tweak for the next production run. But overall, the cabin environment is performing exactly as I designed it to." The words hung in the air. "As I designed it to." Carol Baxter froze her mouth slightly agape. Her brain seemed to be short-circuiting as it tried to process the information. She looked from the powerful airline executive fawning over this woman to the woman herself who was speaking about the aircraft cabin with the intimate knowledge of a creator. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture she could not comprehend. "You designed it?" Carol stammered, pointing a trembling finger at Lena. "Designed what?" "The logo, Mr." Harrison turned to face her. His earlier patience gone replaced by a cool, almost icy demeanor. "Mrs. Baxter, you are speaking to Lena Morgan. Dr. Morgan is one of the world's foremost aerospace architects. She didn't design the logo. She designed this entire cabin. Everything you see, everything you touch, from the ergonomic seats you've been complaining about, to the dynamic lighting system, to the very in-flight entertainment interface that you're having trouble with. She is the lead architect of the A390neo's passenger experience." Silence. A profound, stunned silence fell over the surrounding rows. The young man with the phone, Leo, slowly lowered his bag of peanuts, his eyes wide. Carol's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, dawning horror. And finally a deep, mortifying flush of shame that spread from her neck to her forehead. She looked at Lena, truly looked at her for the first time. Not as a demographic, not as an obstacle, but as the individual Mr. Harrison had just described. She saw the quiet intelligence in her eyes, the unshakable confidence in her posture. She remembered her own vile words: diversity quota upgrade, affirmative action hire. The full weight of her catastrophic misjudgment crashed down on her. The woman she had racially profiled, insulted, and tried to bully out of a seat was the master designer of the very environment she was in. She hadn't just complained to the manager, she had complained to the creator of the universe. As David Harrison and Marcus moved to discreetly reset Carol Baxter's entertainment screen, leaving her to stew in her own humiliation, Lena leaned her head back against the seat. She closed her eyes, but she wasn't resting. Her mind was a whirlwind, replaying the confrontation, but also traveling back in time through the long and arduous journey that had led her to seat 14B on this specific aircraft. The seat itself was a testament to that journey. She ran her hand along the armrest, feeling the smooth, cool touch of the recycled aluminum alloy, a material she had fought to include. She thought of the initial pitch meeting at Odyssey's headquarters 4 years ago. She had walked into a boardroom filled with men engineers, executives, finance guys, all of them skeptical. She was younger than most of them, and she was the only black woman in the room. Her proposal wasn't just for a new interior. It was for a new philosophy of air travel. She hadn't presented them with fabric swatches and color palettes. She had presented them with data on circadian rhythms studies on passenger anxiety and ergonomic models based on hundreds of body types. She spoke of human-centric design, of creating a space that didn't just transport people, but cared for them. Air travel is inherently stressful, she had told the silent boardroom. We are sealed in a pressurized tube hurtling through the stratosphere. Our bodies are in a state of low-grade crisis. The cabin design shouldn't fight that. It should soothe it. Her vision was ambitious. She proposed a dynamic LED lighting system that would shift in color temperature and intensity throughout the flight, mimicking a natural 24-hour cycle to reduce jet lag. The old guard of engineers scoffed, citing costs and complexity. She came back with data proving that reduced jet lag led to higher customer satisfaction and loyalty, directly impacting their bottom line. She designed the starlight ceiling. In the darkened cabin during overnight flights, a fiber optic system would project a subtle, scientifically accurate map of the constellations. It wasn't a gimmick. It was based on psychological studies about the calming effect of vast natural patterns. People had called it frivolous. Lena called it essential. And then there were the seats. Oh, the seats. They had been her biggest battle. The airline wanted to cram in as many as possible. The manufacturer had a standard off-the-shelf model they pushed on all their clients. Lena refused. She spent 18 months working with a team of ergonomists and materials scientists to create the seat she was now sitting in. It featured a proprietary memory foam that adjusted to body heat and pressure points. The headrest was designed with a unique articulated joint that could cradle the neck at a precise angle, preventing stiffness. The tray table had a built-in groove to hold a tablet upright, a simple feature that countless designs had overlooked. She remembered the dismissive comments from a senior engineer, a man named Peterson. To Morgan, he'd said, with a patronizing sigh in one meeting, "This is a passenger aircraft, not a day spa. Your focus on feelings and ambience is going to blow the budget." Lena had looked him dead in the eye. Mr. Peterson feelings are quantifiable. A passenger who feels rested and cared for is a passenger who books with us again. The ambience is the product. We are not just selling a journey from point A to point B. We are selling the experience of that journey. My design will be the reason they choose Odyssey over your standard, soulless cattle car. David Harrison had been in that meeting. He had seen the fire in her eyes, the unimpeachable logic in her arguments, and he had become her staunchest ally. He gave her the political cover she needed to push her vision through, Now sitting here, she felt the gentle airflow from the custom-designed vents, which created a laminar flow air curtain around each passenger, reducing the spread of germs, a feature she'd conceptualized long before the world was concerned with pandemics. She heard the near-silent latch of an overhead bin, a sound she had obsessed over with the acoustics team for weeks. Every single detail was a memory, a battle won. And every victory had been twice as hard because of who she was. She'd had to be twice as prepared, twice as articulate, twice as resilient as her male counterparts. Her ideas were scrutinized more, her authority questioned more. The prejudice wasn't always as loud and vulgar as Carol Baxter's, but it was often there, a quiet, toxic hum in the background of her professional life. This flight was supposed to be a quiet victory lap, a private moment of communion with her creation. Instead, it had become a stark reminder that no matter how high she flew, no matter what she built, there would always be people like Carol who would look at her and see only the color of her skin. They would never imagine the complex, brilliant architecture of the mind that lay behind her eyes. They would assume her seat was given to her, never conceiving that she had, in the most literal sense, built it herself. A small, wry smile touched her lips. Carol Baxter had complained about the seat, the screen, the very substance of the aircraft. She was, in essence, criticizing Lena's own mind, and she had no idea how spectacularly, how intimately she was about to be proven wrong. The remainder of the meal service was conducted in a thick, uncomfortable silence around rows 14 and 15. Carol Baxter sat ramrod straight, her face a pale, frozen mask. She hadn't touched her food. She stared blankly at her now functioning entertainment screen, which was displaying the flight map, a tiny airplane icon inching its way across the vast Atlantic. It was a perfect metaphor for her own slow, agonizing journey toward a destination of public humiliation. Meanwhile, a few rows back, Leo, the young vlogger, was working quietly but efficiently. He had indeed recorded the entire initial confrontation, from Carol's first entitled demand to her final venomous mutterings about affirmative action. When David Harrison had made the stunning reveal of Lena's identity, Leo had managed to capture the moment discreetly. He knew he was sitting on viral gold. This wasn't just a Karen video. This was a story with a perfect narrative arc, a villain, a humble hero, a dramatic twist, and a deeply satisfying comeuppance. He connected to the plane's Wi-Fi, a high-speed satellite service that was another one of Lena's insisted-upon features, and began to upload the clip. He wrote a short, punchy caption. Unbelievable scenes on the new Odyssey. A390. Woman, racially profiles and bullies. A black passenger for her seat, only to find out the woman she's harassing is the brilliant architect who designed the entire plane. You have to see this. # plane, Karen, instant karma. Black excellence. He hit post. The video shot onto Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram simultaneously. At first, it was just a few likes and retweets. Then it began to accelerate. A major journalist on the flight who had witnessed the event from a few rows away saw the video and retweeted it to his 2 million followers. From there, it exploded. Before they were even halfway to London, the story was trending worldwide. At Plain Karen and Dr. Lena. Morgan were the top 2 topics on Twitter. News outlets were already writing articles using screenshots from Leo's video. The internet's amateur detectives, fueled by righteous indignation, got to work. Using the name Carol Baxter and the mention of her million-mile flyer status, they quickly identified her. They found her LinkedIn profile, which listed her as a senior partner at a major management consulting firm in New York, a firm that had just last month released a glowing press release about its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The digital wildfire was raging while Carol Baxter remained blissfully, or perhaps willfully, unaware in her pressurized cocoon. Up in the cockpit and the crew rest area, the airline's own communication systems were lighting up. David Harrison was receiving urgent messages from Odyssey's PR department on the ground. They had seen the video. They were in full-blown crisis management mode. Harrison made his way back to Lena's seat, crouching in the aisle to speak with her privately. "Lena, I am so profoundly sorry," he began. "This should have been a triumphant moment for you." Instead, Lena offered him a reassuring smile. "It's not your fault, David. You can't control the ignorance of every passenger." "Perhaps not, but we can control our response," he said grimly. "The video of the incident is, well, it's everywhere. Our PR team is preparing a statement. They would like to know if you'd be willing to be named in it. We want to celebrate you and your contribution to make it clear where we stand." Lena considered it for a moment. Her first instinct was to shy away from the attention. She was a private person, someone who preferred to let her work speak for itself. But this was different. Her work had been dragged into a very public, very ugly display of prejudice. To remain silent would be to let Carol Baxter's narrative, however briefly, hold some power. "Yes," she said, finally. "You can use my name. But I have one condition. The statement shouldn't be about punishing her. It should be about celebrating the work. It should highlight the innovation of the diverse team that built this plane. Turn this into a teaching moment, not just a public shaming." Harrison looked at her with immense respect. "You are a class act, Lena." "Absolutely. We will frame it that way." As Harrison walked away, Lena felt a subtle shift in the cabin's atmosphere. People were looking at her differently now. The other passengers who had previously seen her as just the quiet woman at the center of a dispute now saw her as a figure of immense achievement. They looked around the cabin with new eyes, seeing not just walls and seats, but the tangible product of her intellect. They smiled at her with a newfound reverence. The humiliation for Carol, however, was just beginning. Her husband, Richard, had connected to the Wi-Fi to check his emails. His face grew paler and paler as he scrolled through his phone. He nudged his wife, his hand trembling slightly. "Carol," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Oh God, Carol. Look at this." He showed her his phone. She saw her own face contorted in an ugly sneer in a video being played by millions. She saw the headlines: consulting firm, partner in racist rant on inaugural flight. She saw comments pouring in by the thousands, calling her a disgrace, calling for her to be fired. Her world, which had been so orderly and secure just hours ago, was atomizing in real time. She let out a small, strangled gasp. It was the sound of a privileged life cracking under the sudden immense pressure of public accountability. Her little bubble of entitlement had just burst, and the vacuum of consequence was rushing in. The descent into London Heathrow was for most passengers a smooth and uneventful end to a transatlantic flight. For Carol Baxter, it was a 7-mile drop into a personal abyss. Every ping from her husband's phone was another nail in the coffin of her reputation. An urgent email had arrived from the managing partner of her firm. The subject line was simply, "Call me immediately." Another was from the board of the charity she chaired, announcing an emergency meeting to discuss her position. Her professional life, built over decades, was being dismantled before the plane's wheels even touched the tarmac. She attempted a desperate last-ditch act of contrition. Unbuckling her seatbelt the moment the plane was below 10,000 feet, earning a sharp reprimand from the cabin crew, she stumbled into the aisle and approached Lena's seat. "Dr. Morgan," she began, her voice quivering and pathetic. I had no idea. I am so sorry. What I said was unforgivable. I was stressed. The travel, it wasn't me." Lena looked up at her, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer the absolution Carol was so clearly begging for. She simply nodded. "Thank you for your apology, Mrs. Baxter. I suggest you return to your seat." The cold, dismissive finality of it was more punishing than any tirade could have been. There was no argument to be had, no negotiation to be made. She had been weighed, measured, and dismissed. Defeated Carol retreated to her seat for the final time. As the A390neo taxied to the gate, the captain's voice came over the intercom, but with an unusual addendum. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have now arrived at London Heathrow. We ask that you remain in your seats until the seatbelt sign has been switched off. However, we do have a special announcement. On board with us today is the lead architect for this aircraft's revolutionary interior, Dr. Lena Morgan. We thank her for her incredible contribution to aviation and passenger comfort. Let's give her a round of applause." The cabin erupted. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a genuine, heartfelt ovation. Passengers stood up to get a better look, to applaud the woman who had been so quiet and dignified in the face of such ugliness. Lena, taken by surprise, felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She gave a small, grateful wave. It was a beautiful, spontaneous moment of recognition and respect. For Carol, it was pure, unadulterated torture. Every clap was a hammer blow to her ego. She sank lower in her seat, wishing the floor would swallow her whole. The moment the seatbelt sign switched off, the real-world consequences began. As passengers began to collect their belongings, David Harrison appeared at Carol and Richard's row, accompanied by two stern-looking airport security officials, Mrs. Baxter. Mr. Baxter Harrison said, his voice devoid of any warmth, "If you'll please come with me. We need to have a word with you before you proceed to immigration." Other passengers moved aside, their faces a mixture of pity and schadenfreude, to let the grim procession pass. Carol, her face ashen, was escorted off the plane like a common criminal. They were taken to a small, sterile office in the airline's operations center. A representative from Odyssey's legal team was waiting. The conversation was short and brutal. Carol was informed that due to her abusive and discriminatory behavior towards another passenger and her disruption of the flight crew's duties, she was being issued a lifetime ban from Odyssey Airlines and all its partner carriers. Her platinum medallion status was revoked effective immediately, and all her accumulated air miles, over 2 million of them, were forfeited. "You can't do this," she sputtered. "We can. And we have," the legal representative said flatly. "Your conduct was a clear violation of our conditions of carriage. It was also a direct contradiction to the values our company stands for. We have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior." While this was happening, Richard finally got through to his wife's managing partner on the phone. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. He hung up and looked at his wife, his face pale. "They've suspended you, Carol, pending a full investigation. The board is furious. They said the firm's reputation is in tatters. The twin pillars of Carol's life, her privileged travel status and her high-powered career, had crumbled to dust in the span of a 7-hour flight." Lena deplaned quietly amidst the well-wishes of other passengers. As she entered the terminal, Leo the vlogger caught up with her. "Dr. Morgan." he said a little breathlessly. "I'm the one who posted the video. I just wanted to say you are an inspiration. What you did, how you handled yourself. It was amazing." Lena looked at him, then at the phone in his hand. "You've made me more famous than I ever intended to be," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Just do me a favor. In all this, make sure the focus stays on the work, on the idea that genius can come from anywhere and from anyone. That's the real story." With that, she smiled, turned, and walked toward customs, leaving the chaos of the viral storm behind her, her head held high. She had a new aircraft to get into production, and she had no more time to waste on small, ignorant people. Her work, as always, was waiting. The story of Odyssey Flight 1, which should have been a footnote in aviation blogs about the launch of a new aircraft, instead became a global phenomenon. It was no longer just a viral video. It was a cultural parable for the modern age, dissected on news channels, debated in opinion columns, and shared across millions of social media feeds. It became a story about the collision of two Americas, one built on unearned privilege and casual bigotry, the other forged in brilliance, resilience, and quiet dignity. At the center of this whirlwind stood Dr. Lena Morgan, a woman who had only ever wanted her work to speak for itself, now forced to speak for it herself. Initially, the fame was a disorienting and unwelcome intrusion. Her phone rang incessantly with calls from reporters, book publishers, and television producers. Her email inbox, once a tidy repository of technical specifications and project timelines, was now a flood of interview requests and unsolicited opinions. She was a private, methodical person, more comfortable with blueprints than with the bright lights of a media studio. Her first instinct was to retreat to issue a simple statement and let the storm pass. She sat in her London hotel room the day after the flight, watching herself on CNN, feeling a profound sense of detachment, as if they were talking about someone else entirely. But as she watched, she saw the narrative beginning to drift. The focus was shifting entirely to Carol Baxter, the schadenfreude of her downfall, the memes of her enraged face, the public spectacle of her cancellation. Lena realized with a sinking feeling that she was in some measure of becoming a footnote in her own story, reduced to the role of the woman who was wronged. Her work, the 4 years of her life, poured into the Ethelred A390neo, was becoming incidental scenery in a drama about a plain Karen. That evening, David Harrison called her, his voice weary but resolute. "Lena, the world is listening," he said. "They're listening to us, but more importantly, they're listening for you. You have a platform right now that most people, most companies, can only dream of. What do you want to say?" It was the question that galvanized her. To remain silent would be to let Carol Baxter's ignorance have the last word. It would be to cede the narrative to the very forces that had tried to diminish her. She had not spent her career battling skepticism and surmounting obstacles just to be defined by one woman's prejudice. She took a deep breath. "All right, David," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Let's set up an interview. But not just any interview. I want to talk to someone who will understand the bigger picture." 2 weeks later, Lena sat opposite a renowned journalist, not in a flashy news studio, but in a quiet, sunlit corner of the TWA Hotel at JFK Airport, a cathedral of mid-century aviation design. She spoke not of victimhood, but of vision. She eloquently and passionately detailed her philosophy of designing for dignity. She explained how the specific curve of a seat back could reduce passenger anxiety. how the precise color temperature of cabin lighting could ease the physiological stress of travel, how creating a beautiful, functional, and respectful environment was not a luxury, but a fundamental necessity. The incident on the flight, she explained, her voice resonating with calm authority, wasn't really about me or Mrs. Baxter. It was a symptom of a failure of imagination. She looked at me and could not imagine that I belonged there, let alone that I had created the space around her. My work and the work of so many innovators from diverse backgrounds is a direct challenge to that failure of imagination. We are building a future that some people are not yet equipped to see. The goal is not to punish them, but to make the world we are building so compelling that they have no choice but to adjust their vision. The interview was a masterclass in turning a negative into a profound positive. It re-centered the narrative on her genius. At Dr. Lena. Morgan trended again, but this time it was alongside #WomenInSTEM and #BlackExcellence. The story was no longer just about karma, it was about creation. She used her newfound platform to announce the launch of the Morgan Foundation, funded by a generous donation from Odyssey Airlines and a significant portion of the bonus she received for the A390 project. Its mission was to provide scholarships and mentorship to young women and students of color pursuing careers in engineering, architecture, and industrial design. She was building a ladder for those who would come after her. For Carol Baxter, the descent was as swift and brutal as her rise to infamy. Returning to New York was like returning to a city she no longer recognized. The managing partner of her firm, a man who had once lauded her as a rainmaker, fired her via a cold 2-sentence email citing the company's morals clause. Her clients, terrified of the brand association, had already severed their ties. The board of her prestigious co-op building began proceedings to have her removed, citing behavior that had brought the building into disrepute. Her husband, Richard, a man accustomed to a life of quiet comfort, found himself in a constant state of damage control. Their relationship, once a partnership of mutual ambition, frayed under the immense pressure. He vacillated between blaming her for her stupid, arrogant outburst and trying to defend the woman he had been married to for 30 years. Their arguments were bitter and circular echoes in a sprawling Park Avenue apartment that now felt more like a prison than a home. Carol's attempt at a public relations rehabilitation was a spectacular failure. She hired a top-tier crisis manager who arranged an exclusive interview on a popular morning show. Dressed in a soft, apologetic shade of grey, Carol read a prepared statement about her deep regret and unconscious bias. But when pressed with unscripted questions, her composure cracked. She spoke of her own stress, her knee condition, and the terrible ordeal her family was going through. In trying to elicit sympathy for herself, she revealed her complete inability to comprehend the harm she had caused. The public saw it not as remorse, but as narcissistic self-pity. The clip of her lamenting her own suffering went viral, becoming a new source of mockery. The karma was relentless. Her punishment wasn't just the loss of her status, but the public exposure of her character. She was forever trapped in the amber of that one flight, defined by the ugliest version of herself. Odyssey Airlines, under David Harrison's guidance, executed a corporate response that would be taught in business schools for years to come. They didn't just fire off a press release, they took tangible action. They ran a full-page ad in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. It was a simple, elegant photo of the A390 Neo cabin with text that read, "Some people see an airplane. We see a masterpiece of human-centric design." The easel read, A390, Neo by Dr. Lena Morgan and her diverse team of innovators. Welcome aboard. They made Lena the face of their brand. Her TED Talk was sponsored by the airline. They became the primary corporate backer of her new foundation. This wasn't just good, it was brilliant business. The A390 Neo became the most sought-after flight experience in the world. People booked tickets specifically to fly on Dr. Morgan's plane. The airline's stock price surged, and they won numerous awards for customer experience and corporate responsibility. They proved that embracing diversity and standing firmly against prejudice wasn't just the right thing to do, it was the profitable thing to do. One crisp autumn morning, a few months later, Lena was at the Odyssey Airlines hangar at JFK, walking the tarmac, with a group of the first scholarship recipients from her foundation, bright-eyed, ambitious students from colleges across the country. She was pointing out the unique curvature of the A390's winglet when David Harrison approached, a wide smile on his face. "Quite a tour group you've got here," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. "The next generation," Lena replied, her eyes shining with pride as she watched the students pepper a lead engineer with questions. "They're the ones who are going to design the things we can't even imagine yet." They stood together watching the sun glint off the fuselage of the aircraft that had inadvertently changed both their lives. "You know," Harrison said quietly, "what happened on that flight? It was ugly. But look what grew out of it. You've inspired millions of people. You've changed this company from the inside out. You turned a moment of pure ignorance into a movement." Lena took a sip of her coffee, her gaze fixed on the magnificent machine. "The human element was always the point of the design, David," she said. "It's chaotic and unpredictable. Sometimes it's ugly, but it's also where you find the capacity for genius, for growth, for grace." She looked at her plane, and saw more than just a vessel. She saw a testament. It was proof that a structure, whether made of metal or of society, is only as strong and as beautiful as the vision of the person who dares to build it. She couldn't control who came aboard, but she had in the end controlled the story. And she would continue to build a world that left no room for the failures of imagination. Her work, and the work of the generation she was now lifting up, was just beginning. That was a story of instant karma, where a moment of prejudice collided with a world of unrecognized genius. It's a powerful reminder that we never truly know the story of the person sitting next to us. Dr. Lena Morgan wasn't just a passenger. She was a creator, a pioneer who had earned her place in the world 1,000 times over. Carol Baxter learned a brutal lesson: the world has changed. The pedestals of privilege are less stable than they used to be, and a single act of hatred captured for the world to see can bring a lifetime of entitlement crashing down. What did you think of Carol's karma? Was it too harsh, or was it exactly what she deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and these stories are a way for us to explore these complex issues together. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic storytelling. Thank you for listening.